August 9th, 1945, 29,000 feet above Kyushu, Japan. The B-29 superfortress named Boxcar shudders as it cuts through a ceiling of gray. The cockpit smells of sweat and gasoline, metal and fear. The engines roar in a steady, punishing rhythm that you can feel more than hear, a constant vibration through aluminum skin and boot soles. Major Charles W. Sweeney squints through the bombardment of light and shadow ahead, hands tight on the yoke. The glass before him is smeared with condensation, the view beyond flickering between blinding sun and smothering cloud. Somewhere down there, hidden under that shifting white blanket, lies Kokura, the city assigned to die today. Behind him, in the plexiglass nose, the bombardier peers through his optical sight, searching for a city he cannot see. His world is a circle of glass and crosshairs. Rail yards, arsenal, industrial district. Those are the words he was briefed on. Now all he sees is gray. Anything Sweeney calls forward, negative. Too much cover, comes the reply. Tight and clipped through the interphone. The bomb bay doors are sealed for now, but everyone on board knows what waits there. Fat Man, a plutonium implosion device, squat and brutal. Far more powerful than the weapon that had turned Hiroshima into a burning wound 3 days earlier. The crew does not know the exact numbers. Not really, but they have seen the photographs. They have heard the words vaporized and firestorm. Outside, the sky over Kokura is wrong for killing. A thick haze clings to the city, joined by something more sinister than mere weather. Smoke. The night before, American bombers had attacked nearby Yahata, and now the winds drag the burning remains across the sky, laying a dirty curtain over the primary target. Far below, Kokura wakes to sirens. People in wooden houses and factory dormitories stumble from sleep, pull on clothes with shaking hands, clutch children to their chests. Anti-aircraft guns rotate upward. The air raid wardens shout, herding people toward shelters, tunnels, any space carved into the earth. Somewhere, a worker pauses on a factory catwalk, looks up at a sky that is strangely empty, the usual sharp glint of silver planes hidden by dense cover. He hears the siren, but not the bomber. Not yet. Boxcar approaches the initial point, the marker from which the bombing run must begin. Orders are clear. This mission requires visual confirmation of the target. No radar drop, no blind release. They must see Kokura's heart before they can tear it out. Coming up on the run, the navigator reports, tracing imagined lines over the map spread across his knees, sweat beads on his forehead, smearing ink where his hand lingers too long. Flak begins to burst in the clouds around them, ugly black flowers appearing out of nowhere. The plane jolts as concussions slap its wings. Invisible gunners on the ground fire on a bomber they can barely glimpse, aiming by sound and guesswork. Bombardier. You have control, Sweeney says, handing over the fate of a city with a few simple words. The bomber steadies. Everyone waits. The bombardier searches. Gray. More gray. A shifting patch where rail lines should be. A darker smudge where the arsenal might sit. He hesitates. This is not what the briefing photos looked like. Can you see it? A long second. 2. Negative. Target obscured. They break off the run, banking away, engines straining as the heavy bomber hauls itself back into a turn. Every minute of delay burns fuel they do not have to spare, drags the mission deeper into uncertainty. Yet they line up again, hoping for a hole in the clouds, a fleeting, terrible moment of clarity. Below, Kokura vanishes more completely under the spreading shroud. Smoke thickens. Clouds close ranks. The city, for now, is a rumor beneath a moving sea of gray. Boxcar turns back toward the hidden target, unaware that each circle, each minute spent chasing a view through the clouds, is pulling another city on another bay inexorably into the crosshairs. The second bombing run begins with a tightening of shoulders and jaws inside Boxcar. The bombardier once again takes command of the plane's motion, his hands light on the controls of the sight, guiding the hulking bomber along an invisible line through the sky, approaching target area. "Stand by," he says, more out of duty than hope. The clouds have not lifted. If anything, they have grown thicker, as if the sky itself is determined to hide the city below. Wisps of smoke from Yahata's burned factories coil and spread, merging with natural cloud into one seamless, opaque shield. Outside the windows, anti-aircraft bursts continue to bloom, sudden bowls of black against pale gray, rocking the aircraft with every near miss. The gunners in their plexiglass bubbles scan futilely for fighters, for any sign of the enemy in the murk. They see only flashes, shadows, the streak of a shell that passes too close. In the radio compartment, the radio man clutches his headphones tighter, listening to clipped voices in English and Japanese, fragments of orders, alarms, static. His heart races in time with every burst outside. "Just need one break," the bombardier mutters to himself as he peers into the sight. "Just one opening." He searches for the rail yards that were circled in red on the briefing photos, for the rectangular sprawl of the arsenal, for the grid of streets that would anchor his aim. Instead, he tracks a shifting mass of gray that refuses to resolve into anything solid. Sweeney glances at the fuel gauges. The needles are already lower than they should be. They had taken off late, burned extra fuel waiting for a rendezvous that went wrong. Every diversion, every circle above Kokura, is eating away at the margin that separates a completed mission from a silent ditching in hostile waters. "Can you identify the target?" he asks. A pause. Only the rumble of engines fills the gap. Negative. No positive visual. It is just not there. It is there, of course. Kokura exists, pulsing with life far below, on the ground. The sirens continue to wail. In an air raid shelter carved into a hillside, people huddle shoulder to shoulder, the thick smell of earth and sweat and kerosene lamps hanging in the air. A mother clutches her son so tightly his ribs ache, whispering a half-finished prayer into his hair. At the arsenal, workers who had been ordered to stand by shift uneasily, watching the cloudy sky whenever they dare step outside. Some can hear the faint buzz of engines above, swallowed and released by the heavy cover. Impossible to locate. A few remember Yakuta's recent devastation and imagine the same fate descending unseen upon Kokura. Yet nothing falls. The planes drone, the flak thumps, but no bombs scream down through the clouds. Confusion ripples through the crowded shelters. Why is it taking so long? Are they being spared or only delayed? Inside Boxcar, the second run ends like the first. No clear sight of the aim point, no city framed neatly in the crosshairs. "We are making another pass," Sweeney decides, the words tasting of risk. The navigator winces as he looks again at the fuel numbers. He does not argue. The weight of Hiroshima hangs in the air with them, unspoken. This weapon is not meant to be carried home. It is meant to be used. The third run begins. The crew is tense now, a silent, coiled kind of tension. Every jolt of flak feels nearer. Every second of blind flying over the target feels stolen. Once more the bombardier hunts through his glass eye. The cloud shield holds. The arsenal remains invisible. The rail yards guessed rather than seen. He can almost convince himself a darker patch is a target. Almost accept shadow as evidence. Almost. He cannot make himself say, "I see it." Still no positive visual. He finally reports, his voice flat. That single choice, that refusal to invent certainty, seals the fate of another city instead. Sweeney exhales slowly. The fuel situation is now dangerous. The orders are clear about this too. If the primary target cannot be bombed visually, They are to proceed to the secondary, Nagasaki. On the coast, wrapped around a deep harbor far from Kokura's smoke-covered sky. Another city goes about its mourning, unaware that somewhere above the clouds, the hand of destruction is beginning to turn in its direction. Sweeney levels the plane, gives the order no one below will hear. Set course for the secondary target. Kokura recedes behind them, still veiled, still trembling under the glare of unseen engines and unheard decisions. The hour in which clouds and smoke refuse to part has passed. The city still stands. For the people in its shelters and streets, the all clear will come later, and they will spill back into the daylight not knowing how narrow the margin had been, how close their name had come to being etched into the history of annihilation. The turn toward Nagasaki feels heavier than the aircraft's actual bank, as if gravity itself has shifted inside Boxcar. The engines drone on, never faltering. But there is a new weight in every mind on board. Course adjusted. Heading south, the navigator announces, pencil dragging a fresh line across the map. His eyes flick again to the fuel gauges and he swallows. If anything goes wrong now, there will be no generous choices, only hard ones. In the bomb bay, Fat Man hangs quiet and implacable in its cradle, an angular beast surrounded by cables and braces. Below, clouds slide past, their shapes meaningless against the enormity of what the bomber carries. Nagasaki was the backup in the briefing room, a secondary name on the board. Even then it had been described in practical terms: industrial city, shipyards, arms factories, urban valleys squeezed between steep green hills. A good target. Effective. Now it is the city that will have to do. As Boxcar pushes toward the coast, Nagasaki is beginning a day that feels almost ordinary. The sky here is not as heavily shrouded as Kokura's, though patchy clouds drift over the harbor and hills. Along the waterfront, dock workers haul ropes and crates, the smell of salt and tar in every breath. In the Urakami Valley, chimneys send their thin prayers of smoke upward from factories and homes. A tram rattles through the streets, clanging its bell, weaving between office workers, housewives with baskets, children who loiter too long at crossings until pulled away by impatient hands. Air raid sirens have become part of life, and this morning there is no screaming wail to jolt everyone underground. There are only faint rumors of what happened at Hiroshima, stories that sound like nightmares told too vividly. Some believe them. Some do not. How could any city simply vanish in a single blast? Up in the sky, Boxcar nears the rendezvous with a weather plane that has gone ahead to scout conditions. The crew cranes to spot it, knowing that what they hear next could decide whether this mission ends in success, failure, or something far worse. A fragment of conversation crackles through the headphones. Reports of broken clouds over Nagasaki. Not perfect, but perhaps enough. Better than Kokura, someone mutters. No one laughs. The flight engineer checks the fuel again. The numbers are troubling now, edging toward the territory where return plans start to look like gambles instead of routes. The options narrow. Complete the mission. Then try to limp to Okinawa and pray the runway comes into view before the tanks run dry. Sweeney stares ahead, jaw tight. There is no question of abandoning the bomb over the sea, no thought of turning back with Fat Man still slung beneath them. The weapon is not built for safe landings. The entire world of this plane runs on the assumption that at the end of this mission, the bomb will be gone and a city will be changed forever. Approaching target area, the navigator calls, Nagasaki ahead. Clouds thicken again as they near the coastline, gathering over the mountains that cradle the city. From above, the terrain is treacherous, ridges and valleys twisting like folded paper. Nagasaki sits nestled within, protected by nature from some angles, but not from this one. On the ground, a few eyes lift to the sky as a distant engine note grows louder. Some residents pause on bridges and street corners, shading their faces as they search the pale vault overhead. The sound is familiar enough that it does not instantly send them running. They have heard American planes before, sometimes far away, sometimes passing on to other targets. Today, they listen a little longer. Boxcar bores in toward the city, the bomb bay doors still closed, the crew returning to their stations for another precision run. The bombardier settles once more behind his sight, ready to trade the memory of Kokura's stubborn cloud shield for a clearer view. But as Nagasaki rises toward them, the clouds gather, drifting across the aiming point like a slow, deliberate curtain, it seems, for a heartbeat, as if the same hand that spared Kokura might reach out to shield this city as well. The city comes into view in pieces, a broken patchwork of hills, river, harbor, and cloud. From the cockpit of Boxcar, Nagasaki is a shifting puzzle where the missing pieces matter most. Cloud cover about 60%. The weather report had promised. From up here, it feels like more. Large, stubborn sheets drift over the Urakami Valley, veiling and unveiling the ground in slow, lazy sweeps. Target area is under scattered cloud, the navigator says, his voice tight. We can try a visual if we get a break. Once again, the order is given. Bombardier, you have control. The big bomber steadies into its approach. The bombardier presses his eye to the sight, muscles already aching from hours of tension. Through the glass disc, the world becomes lines and angles, a ghostly landscape sliding beneath the crosshairs. But the primary aiming point, the Mitsubishi Arms Works, is swallowed again and again by cloud banks that drift into place at precisely the wrong moments. The hills around Nagasaki make the air turbulent, tossing the plane in small, vicious bumps that jostle the sight and smear the view. On the ground below, Nagasaki moves through its late morning. In Urakami, outside the cathedral, a priest steps into the light for a moment, feeling the warmth of the sun fade and return as clouds slide overhead. The bells have not yet rung the hour. In a factory yard, young women in work clothes chat as they carry tools and parts between buildings, their voices rising and falling with nervous laughter that covers the constant undercurrent of fear that wartime has burned into them. In a small house on a hillside, an old man adjusts his radio, squinting at the dial, trying to catch a station through the hiss of static. He hears fragments, news from distant fronts, rumors of a new kind of bomb dropped on Hiroshima. He frowns, leans closer, as if proximity could make the reports less unreal. Above them, unseen, Boxcar continues its run. Clouds closing in again. The bombardier mutters. He can see glimpses, a river bend, a crossroads, the curve of the harbor. Never long enough, never clear. His hand hovers over the release controls. Fingers tense but unmoving. Sweeney listens as the seconds stretch. Fuel is vanishing. The terrain is dangerous. The mission cannot drag on like Kokura. Can you get it? He asks. No answer at first. Only the drone of engines, the hiss of oxygen through masks. The bombardier is war inside his own skull, torn between pressure and precision. Primary aiming point still obscured. He finally replies, we may have to use radar. Radar bombing, dropping through cloud using instruments instead of sight, was not the preferred method for Fat Man. But the alternative is circling until fuel and options run out. The radar operator leans into his scope, tracing ghostly outlines of the land below, the sweep of signals that bounce back from hill and harbor. A new plan forms, a line on the city as a whole, except the loss of pinpoint accuracy. Then, just as they begin to shift to this backup, it happens. A gap, a jagged tear appears in the cloud cover over Urakami. A brief, bright window that opens almost by chance. Through it, the bombardier glimpses part of the valley. Roof lines, factory structures. The shapes he has studied in photographs turned suddenly real and vulnerable. "Wait, I have an opening," he snaps. "I see it. I can take it." The plane steadies once more. The crosshairs settle, the world below sliding into alignment. There is no time for hesitation now. The sight locks. The aiming point is not perfect, but it is there, bombs away. The release is almost gentle. Inside the bomb bay, clamps open and Fat Man drops into the thin air, turning from steel weight to falling judgment in an instant. The bomber lurches upward. Suddenly lighter, bomb gone. Comes the confirmation. Sweeney Banks' boxcar hard away from the city, already seeking distance. The crew cranes for a glimpse out the small windows, counting seconds. Below, the falling weapon cuts silently through the patch of clear sky, vanishing into the clouds that still hang over the valley like a half-drawn curtain. In Nagasaki, at 11:02 a.m., a few people look up without knowing why, sensing nothing more than a strange brightness behind the clouds. Then the world turns white. For a moment after detonation, there is no sound, only light. Over the Urakami Valley, the bomb that fell from Boxcar blooms into a sphere of white so intense it bleaches the world of all color. Shadows are burned into walls, into bridges, into the last positions of human beings who had been walking, working, praying. Then the heat arrives. In a radius close to the hypocenter, wooden houses vanish in an instant, turn to flame and then to ash. Roof tiles liquefy and run. People caught in the open feel their skin blister and peel before they can draw a breath to scream. Clothes ignite. Eyes sear. The great doors of Urakami Cathedral are ripped from their hinges. Stained glass shatters inward. Bright fragments turn to flying knives. Worshippers inside are thrown to the ground as the building convulses around them, its stone skeleton snapping under the invisible hammer of the blast. The shock wave tears across the valley, flattening homes and factories alike. Brick walls topple, steel beams bend. A streetcar near the hypocenter derails, hurled sideways like a toy, its passengers flung against each other in a tangle of limbs and twisted metal. Farther from the center, people feel the impact as a sudden, monstrous pressure, a giant hand slamming into their chests. Windows explode, doors buckle, streets vanish under cascades of falling debris. A nurse in a clinic is thrown against a wall, her tray of instruments turned into a cloud of spinning steel. When she can see again, the hallway is choked with dust, the moans of the injured rising through the choking haze. Outside, where the entrance had been, there is only brightness and smoke. In the harbor, sailors stagger as the blast rolls across the water, rattling hulls and rigging. Some rush to the railings, staring inland as a mushroom-shaped column climbs into the sky, its base a roiling mass of fire and boiling dust. Beneath that rising cloud, Nagasaki becomes a landscape of broken shapes. Buildings stand half-sliced, their interiors exposed like doll houses ripped open. Fires race through the ruins, drawn by a wind that seems to blow from every direction at once. Radiation, invisible and silent, seeps through flesh and bone. People who survived the blast stagger through streets that no longer exist, their clothes burned away, skin hanging in strips, hair singed and falling out in clumps. Some clutch their arms in front of them without knowing why. Skin swollen and peeling so badly that their limbs no longer feel like their own. Above the horror they have unleashed, the crew of Boxcar watches the mushroom cloud form. From their altitude, the blast looks almost unreal, like a slow-motion experiment in some distant laboratory. A glaring column pushing upward, a stem of smoke, a cap that spreads and curls at the edges, billowing higher and higher. "Dear God," someone whispers into the interphone. The words are not part of any checklist. No one cheers. No one speaks of success. For a few seconds, there is only stunned silence broken by the steady, indifferent drone of the engines carrying them away. Then reality rushes back in. Fuel, distance, survival. We have got to get to Okinawa, the flight engineer reminds them, his voice shaking only a little. The gauges are unforgiving now, their needles dipping toward danger. Boxcar turns away from Nagasaki, leaving the towering cloud to mark the place where a city has been unmade. Back in Kokura, miles away and already fading from the crew's immediate thoughts, life begins to resume after the long, tense hour under the sirens. The all clear finally sounds. People emerge from shelters, blinking in the daylight. Children stretch stiff legs and chase each other along the edges of drainage ditches. Workers drift back toward the arsenal, muttering about the wasted morning, about production quotas, about rationed food waiting at home. Some glance at the sky, now quieter, the clouds still hanging heavy with the smoke from distant fires. They hear rumors that an enemy bomber circled but never struck. A few joke that Kokura must have frightened it away. Others shrug. Another narrow escape. Perhaps. Another day in a war that feels both endless and strangely close to its end. No one there knows that while they adjust their clothing and dust off their shoes, another city has just been turned into a landscape of ash and twisted beams. Kokura's chimneys still stand. Its rail yards are intact. Its wooden houses remain crowded together along their crooked streets. The wind has hidden the city at the exact hour when being seen meant obliteration. Nagasaki did not have that shield. The return flight is a contest between distance and disappearing fuel. After leaving the rising cloud over Nagasaki behind, Boxcar claws through the sky toward Okinawa, engines drinking from tanks that are almost dry. Every few minutes, the flight engineer bends over the gauges again, as if staring harder might slow the needles. If we do not make it, someone mutters, half joking, they will have to fish us out of the sea with that thing having already gone off. No one answers. The coastline finally appears through the haze. Airfields, runways, the promise of solid ground. The approach is tense, the crew ready for silence to fall over the engines at any moment. Yet the props keep turning, stubborn as the men who tend them. Boxcar hits the runway at Okinawa harder than planned. Tires shrieking, metal shuddering. They roll out, slowing, every foot of concrete another small miracle. When the bomber finally comes to a halt, there is a long, stunned stillness inside the fuselage. Then harness buckles click. Gloved hands fumble with oxygen masks. The hatch opens, letting in wet coastal air that smells of oil, dust and life. On the tarmac, ground crew stare up at the big silver plane, eyes tracking its serial numbers, its unusual load of security. They know something is different about this mission. They can see it in the faces stepping down from the hatch, in the way the officers move with a strange mix of exhaustion and shaken purpose. In the debriefing room, maps are unrolled again. Pencils tap. Cigarettes burn down in forgotten fingers. Cloud cover over Kokura. Sweeney reports. Multiple runs. No visual. Fuel margin forced diversion to secondary target. The words are clinical, efficient. Behind them lies an hour of circling above a city that never fully appeared. An hour in which a single order, a single claim of positive identification would have altered the fate of hundreds of thousands of people. Kokura was completely obscured. The bombardier adds quietly, I could not see what I needed to see. On another map, Nagasaki is marked with a fresh symbol. Notes are added in tight handwriting. Yield estimates, blast radius, observed effects, photographs will follow. Only much later will some of the men who sat in that room think about Kokura again. About the way smoke from another raid drifted at just the right angle. How the natural clouds thickened at just the right hour. about how survival can be a matter of weather. In Kokura, the news arrives in broken pieces. Rumors first, another bomb, another city destroyed. Hiroshima was not a single terrible accident, it seems, but a terrifying new kind of attack. The name Nagasaki spreads through factories and market stalls, through barracks and narrow residential streets. Men stop in doorways to listen. Women in ration lines press closer to the radio. Children watch their parents' faces and understand more from their expressions than from the unfamiliar words. Some who had stood in air raid shelters during the long hour of circling recall the sound of engines overhead, the distant thump of flak. They imagine those planes sliding south, beyond the curtain of cloud and smoke, toward a place they know only from maps and rumors. A phrase begins to take shape in the mouths of survivors. Kokura no un. Kokura's luck. It will come to mean any narrow escape, any moment when death passes by because of timing. Chance. A small shift in the wind. Years later, as Japan rebuilds, Kokura's streets will fill again with vendors, with students in uniforms, with office workers hurrying for trains. Nagasaki, too, will rise from its own ashes, carrying scars in brick and memory alike. Yet the invisible line that separated them on that August morning remains. One city covered, one city seen, one spared, one burned into the history of the atomic age. If you stand in Kokura on a cloudy day and look up, it is impossible not to think of that hour when the sky refused to clear and an entire city kept existing because it could not be clearly seen. The rail yards that were meant to be framed in crosshairs still ring with the clatter of trains. The arsenal, the factories, the dense neighborhoods around them passed through that morning intact, not through decision or mercy, but through obscurity. Somewhere above, once, a bomber circled, searching. It did not find what it needed. Kokura lived,